me, if you'll be so kind, staring out into space, asking God to hear my case, trying to think of all things past. How long will my memory last? The purple angel, purple angel, purple angel, you're next to me.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm Lori LeBay, and I'm the host and founder of Alzheimer Speaks. With every show, I always like to introduce ourselves because we're always getting new listeners. So I'm just going to keep you for a brief moment here before we get into our show. Alzheimer Speaks, for those of you that are new to us, is an advocacy-based company providing multiple platforms to shift our dementia care culture from crisis to comfort worldwide. And we believe that by joining forces and sharing knowledge and just having these everyday conversations about life with dementia, that we're going to be able to remove the stigmas attached to memory loss and help those living with the disease continue to live with purpose. Together, I think we can help one another understand the true needs and help remove the myths and the isolations that just causes so much crisis for family and friends and community alike. At our core, we believe that collaboratively is the only way we're going to win our battle against dementia, and that's one of the reasons I'm so excited about our guests today, because they really seem to have embraced the true collaboration that is needed, and we're going to be talking about that later today. For us here at Alzheimer Speaks, you guys have just been raving fans of ours, and we so appreciate it. You see, without you, there's no way we would have become the number one influencer online regarding Alzheimer's, according to ShareCare and Dr. Oz. It really isn't what we're doing, it's what you're doing. It's taking those couple of seconds to click and like and share the information, because all of our circles, all of our Facebook friends, our LinkedIn colleagues, our Twitter tribes, our Pinterest pals out there are dealing with this. Most of them just aren't talking about their journey with dementia because they don't feel that it's safe. And the more information we can get out there, the more likely they're going to reach out and grab it when the time is right for them. So keep in mind, every time you share information, when you like something regarding Alzheimer's dementia, if it's Alzheimer Speaks or whoever, you are giving hope to the world. And so, again, I just thank you so much for your diligence in taking part and making a difference and being part of the collaboration that's here to change the world. I'd also like to invite you, if you're interested in being part of our show, I'd love to talk to you. Everyone's voice is equally heard on Alzheimer Speaks Radio. So if you are a person diagnosed, maybe you're a person thinking you should get diagnosed, maybe you're a family member caring for someone, or a business who has devised a service, a product, a tool. Maybe you've written a book, a song, a movie. Maybe you're doing some research. We would love to hear from you because, again, together we can make a difference. Each of us is a spark that can light somebody else's campfire and get them going and make them realize their strengths are important and they really, truly can make a difference in the world of dementia. I want to give a shout out to FreshBooks, who is one of our sponsors here. And you can actually go to gofreshbooks.com/alive and get a free 30-day trial. Tax time passed, but I'm sure some of you out there have done some extensions and are still working on getting organized or just, made a commitment to get more organized for next year. So check out FreshBooks. Again, you can go to www.gofreshbooks.com/alive and get that free 30-day trial. You can also get a free 30-day trial by going to audible.com. They have like 180,000 selections that you can choose from. And to get your free Audible book, go to audibletrial.com/social. So let's go ahead and get started with our conversation here today. Like I said, I'm so excited to have these group of individuals who have really come together, such visionaries. We're going to be speaking with the founders of Us Against Alzheimer's, again with some of their key leaders. And we're going to do a 2-hour special because they just have so much going on. We just can't get her done in an hour. So really excited to have them on. I first would like to introduce George Vradenburg, and he's the chairman of Us Against Alzheimer's, which he co-founded in October of 2010 with his wife, Trish. George was named by the U.S. Health and Human Service Secretary to serve on the Advisory Council on Research, Care, and Services established by the National Alzheimer's Plan Act. And for those of you that don't know what that is, a lot of times you'll hear it referred to as NAPA. But they really are our nation's go-to in terms of pushing things forward here with Alzheimer's and dementia. George himself has actually testified before Congress about the global Alzheimer's pandemic, and he's a member of the World Dementia Council. George and Us Against Alzheimer's have also worked really closely with leaders engaged on Alzheimer's disease, which is a coalition, and it's known as LEAD, L-E-A-D, which is quite powerful in and of itself. And also, he is the global CEO initiative on Alzheimer's disease. Like I said, George and his wife, Trish, have just been such dedicated members to this movement, and they are really well-known civic leaders out in Washington. George is chairman of the board for the Phillip Collection, the trustee of the University of the District of Columbia, and a member of the Council of the Foreign Relations and the Economic Club in Washington. He has served in senior executive and legal positions for both CBS, Fox, and AOL Time Warner, and is just moving and shaking the ground that we walk on. So welcome, George. How are you today?
Fine, Lori. Thank you for doing what you're doing and raising awareness and destigmatization of this disease.
Well, I can't not do it. After living my mom's journey for 30 years, which is more than half of my life, there's no way I couldn't do what I'm doing. She was just such an inspiration to help me, make changes that she made me aware of I didn't even know existed. And I think like so many of us, we are touched personally, by this disease to come together and work collaboratively and just reach out to one another. So thank you again for joining us. I'm going to also introduce your wife, Trish, here. Trish is the vice chair of Us Against Alzheimer's, and she began her career in Washington, D.C. as a speechwriter in the U.S. Senate. And boy, I'd love to have a sideline conversation on the politics going on today in the speechwriters, but we won't go there today. Trish has written for various television shows, which a couple of my favorites here, Designing Women, Family Ties, Kate and Allie. She also has a novel called The Liberated Lady, and she most recently also did a play called Surviving Grace, which is kind of a quasi-autobiographical, biographical play, which she produced and was at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., and also off-Broadway at Union Square. It's now being performed in various community theaters throughout the country, as well as Portuguese, and so pretty exciting stuff. So welcome, Trish.
Thank you so much.
Well,
thank you really for what you're doing.
Well, I am, like I said,
yeoman's job.
I am so thrilled to have you both with us. And I'm going to start out by throwing my first question to Trish, and that is, what the heck got you to start Us Against Alzheimer's? Trish, usually
certainly I didn't know anything about it when when my mom in 1987 was diagnosed. But as a, just a background for her, my mom was just so much larger than life, which I know every mother is to their daughter, but she was amazing. I mean, she could capture a room just by entering it. She was politically active in so many things. Head of New Jersey multiple sclerosis, Garden State Ballet, and given credit for winning the state of New Jersey for JFK. As a result, she was named to Nixon's enemy list, and I'm very proud to say that. So she was invincible, this woman. I mean, nothing could stop my mom, but of course she was no match for Alzheimer's. And at the beginning, it wasn't, easy to get her to see a doctor. My mom would say, forget it, doctors kill you. You show me a person who's just died, I'll show you a doctor not 10 feet away. She was right. But unfortunately, denial didn't stop the progression. So I watched helplessly as this lioness of a woman descended into the, unforgiving vortex of Alzheimer's. And my husband was equally in love with her, knew that we had to do something to help stop this murderer. So in, 2010, my husband and I started Us Against Alzheimer's. The only thing my husband has ever failed, in fairness, is retirement. So we have been working. I mean, I was exhausted just listening to your description of him. But, we started actually with the Alzheimer's Association, and we started the National Gala for Alzheimer's, the Alzheimer's Association. And in the 8 years we were there, we raised like, I think $10 million. But it wasn't really enough for us. It was, a once-a-year event, and we needed more. We needed to do more to get it done. We just had, for me, for my husband, more passion and urgency. We just, we're running for time, as you are, as anyone who has this in their family, and we wanted to be able to go to senators and Congress people and shake them up. And I had no fear because they pretty much couldn't fire me. And I would both of us, were outside that door, and we got in because we are politically active, and just always were stating our case. And so I think my husband raised a lot of money in terms of Congress. Went from like $600 million to $950 billion in the last 5 years. I'm not saying it was all us, but we have been given credit by a lot of key players, including the former NIH head. So, and we just keep going because this is not something, it just wasn't possible to not do it. Mm-hmm. And so with you, we're trying to get people the awareness, that say the AIDS people, the HIV AIDS population did. That's what we've got to, get. And it's a harder pull because, Alzheimer's people cannot speak for themselves. We are their voice.
Yeah.
And I think that people who take care of them are just exhausted, so it's hard to mobilize. And here I'm just regurgitating all of this. So I read I've always been an obituaries reader. Mm-hmm. And my dad used to say he would get up in the morning and read the obituaries. If his name wasn't there, he'd go to work. So, I have it in my blood, and no one, we go day after day after day. I say to my husband all the time, look, no one died from Alzheimer's today or this week or this month. When I read the Times, because they're still hiding out.
Yeah. When my mom died, we actually, and to our knowledge, this was the first one done, but we had the purple angel symbol put in her obit just to raise awareness and then to talk a little bit about it, because it was such a big part of her life. It was such a big part of our life. But, there's a lot of people that put symbols in, but, or talk about what or why, and what a great conversation piece, to really be able to raise awareness and let them know this disease does kill,
Yes,
this
they have
disease.
to make their lives stand, and their death really stand for something.
Yeah.
I mean, they put in about my mom that she died of pneumonia, and that may have been the end cause. But I said, no, you've got to eliminate that, because my mother died from complications or as a result of Alzheimer's. I was a strong lady before.
Yeah, but they had that for my mom too. And I said, in this day and age, my gosh, you can add multiple lines onto that death certificate of what contributed to the death. I mean, that's a 15-minute fix for any tech person. There's just really no excuse for that at this point. And so it's, but we have to have those conversations. The other thing that I really like that you talked about, your mom really being invincible until this disease. And I felt really strongly, when you were describing your mom, I'm like, that's my mom too.
I bet she is. You're a strong lady. I bet so. I mean, you have to feel that. I mean, those of us who are gifted, lucky to have a mother like that. Can't really let it go. My mother always said, you cannot leave this lifetime without doing something important, So I think she's still nudging me.
Yeah. Oh, I know mine is. Now, I was going to ask you, what the difference is in your organization versus others, but I'm going to spit something out to you and see if I have it on the mark, because when you were talking, what I heard was the passion to make the change. This isn't a job. This isn't, you're not driven by a paycheck and benefits and the perception of doing good. You are, you've been through the trenches, in the trenches, and are still there with the people going, we can do better. And to me, that's what I see Us Against Alzheimer's positioning themselves is really the passion and the power of people who really get it.
Well, that's true. And, when you say we don't get paid, we pay for all the overhead. I tell my kids all the time. So we're spending your inheritance, but at least you'll live. So they think it's a reasonable trade-off. George can tell you more about what, differences.
Okay.
Georgie?
George, you want to add on to that?
No, I think Trish obviously expresses it more eloquently than I, but 2010, her mother had been diagnosed almost 25 years before, and it seemed as if nothing had changed. There didn't seem to be any movement forward, any trajectory, any momentum, any energy of any kind. There weren't any drugs seemingly, on the horizon. And it seemed to us as if we just needed a jolt. And you put it so well, Lori. It is this organization is driven by people who have been personally touched. The other two co-founders, Meryl Comer, has been caring for her husband at home for over 20 years now, and now has been taking care of her mother in the same home for over 5 years. So she has at her home, and she covers sort of the midnight to 8 shift herself every single day for the last 20-some years. I mean, that is a person who has been not personally does not have the disease, but who has been a caregiver for someone with a disease. And what you learn very quickly in talking to her is that the impact on the caregiver is a second-hand victim of this disease. The caregiver is suffering the stress, the caregiver is stressing anxiety, even physical impairments as a result of trying to lift and do other things to take care of their loved one. And their own health begins to go downhill. And as we know now from statistics, the likelihood that a caregiver will get Alzheimer's is somewhat higher than the regular population because of the stress and anxiety. The fourth co-founder John Dwyer, close friend, but whose Irish family, quite large in nature, is just riddled for the two generations above him with Alzheimer's. And so aunts and uncles have been affected, grandparents have been affected, and he knows that history is telling him that by the time he goes into his late 60s, he is likely to contract the disease. So these are people in different ways and different shapes who've been affected by the disease. Jill Lesser, who I know you're going to have on this call a little later, has recently begun to devote a great deal of time to the cause here, the women's cause. She is a sandwich generation mother. She is a mother who has Alzheimer's, and she has three young, very vigorous, very active sons. And so the organization is driven by heart, by passion, and as I said earlier, by hate or by love, depending on your perspective. Hate for the disease, love for the family members who've been affected by it. So it is that sense of personal ownership, the feel of a sense of personal responsibility to do something that has really brought us into this field, and now virtually making it almost 100% what we're going to do with the rest of our lives, aside from spending time with kids and grandkids.
Now, George, what do you think it's going to take to really move the science forward so that we get a cure or get something that actually, for sure slows it down and is trackable?
Well, there are a number of different flavors of the science, but the net across all those flavors is we need more resource and we need more sharing, more collaboration. So in the basic science, how do we really understand the full pathogenesis, the full history of what causes this disease? We need more research investments, which are both public and philanthropic. There is the science of how you take the insights from knowing what is the cause and course of this disease, and then beginning to identify new molecules that can actually interfere with that pathogenesis pathway of the disease, hit it and stop it. So that translational process is actually a process that is largely invested in by venture capitalists, but where, because of the time, cost, and risk of getting things to market, venture capital is very thin. So new innovative private venture capital mechanisms are needed in that space, as well as some public finance. And then there's clinical science, actually putting a candidate new molecule into humans and testing to see whether it works, whether it is safe, and whether it is effective against the target that you're trying to hit. So there are a variety of flavors of that. And on the latter one, clinical science, we need more collaboration, and we need more resource as well. So resource and sharing, I think, are the two main contributions that we need in order to advance the science more rapidly.
Okay, great. Now, related to that science, what exactly, and how exactly is Us Against Alzheimer's, pushing that forward in terms of resources and science?
Well, certainly on the basic science, we push forward by our politics, which is to mobilize the American people and any number of Alzheimer's-serving organizations across the country in bringing attention to members of Congress the importance of dealing with this disease, both in terms of the scope and scale of human suffering by American families, but also because of the economics, where we're spending less than $1 billion a year on research, but the country and American families are sustaining over $226 billion a year in cost. Any CEO who had a $226 billion cost problem was only investing $1 billion to try to avoid it would be fired. So we are pretty active in Congress. And, of course, the $1 billion, or actually less than $1 billion invested annually in Alzheimer's has been doubled in the last 5 years, but still cancer is invested about $6 billion, and you see cancer deaths going down, you see Alzheimer's deaths going up. So investment makes a difference. In the translational space, we worked with the UK government and with a number of companies to create what will, at the end of this year, be a $200 million venture capital fund that will invest in that translational space, the so-called Valley of Death. And in the clinical research space, we've formed a spin-off of our global CEO initiative on Alzheimer's, which we're styling the Global Alzheimer's Platform Foundation. And it is in the course of raising $70 million over the next 5 years to speed clinical trials by increasing the rate of recruitment to clinical trials and by establishing a standardized standing global network of trial sites around the world that are optimized for faster trials of Alzheimer's drugs.
Okay.
The number one barrier to the speed of getting an innovative medicine on market is the rate at which we recruit individuals to clinical trials. The number of clinical trials now outstanding, but it's taken years to recruit the participants in those trials that we've needed. And if you look down the pike to what we hope to be a larger pipeline of potential products, it will take tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of individuals willing to sign up and participate in clinical trials. And we simply don't have either the economics or the techniques yet to create that many new participants in clinical trials.
Well, and I think that there's a lot of fear, too, for people. Is it really going to matter? What's going to happen? I mean, there's a lot of unanswered questions. And then there are so many trials that people just, like you said, don't even know about. So it's getting people educated on the importance that, there can't be, we can't get a cure without these things. I mean, this is just part of the process. And, we have to all become more proactive and realize the importance of all of these trials and what's going on. I also want to mention, George, I think one of the things that I think you guys have done just beautifully in terms of getting people active in Congress. The way you guys set things up and shoot them out on social media, make it so easy for people to get involved. And you've really, I think, just done such a miraculous job at changing that connection of individuals with their Congress and getting politically active in this. So kudos to you all on that.
Well, thank you for that. My wife has what she calls the members-only policy. She insists that we will only meet with a member of Congress. We will not meet with staff. That's just us individually. Mm-hmm. But because we need really to impress members of Congress, Senate, and House about the importance of this to the American people. With that said, one of the things that we think is happening at the same time is that more members of Congress themselves are talking about the fact that they have Alzheimer's in their families. Mm-hmm. That is causing congressmen and senators themselves to recognize that what they're experiencing, they can talk about. So talk about, awareness raising. It is members of Congress talking about what's happening in their own families. And as you know, so many families are being affected. So many families of members of Congress are being affected. And that is itself beginning to create its own momentum. With that said, every congressman has a different priority in life, their political life and their professional life. And so we're always fighting for Alzheimer's investments and actually now fighting for means of mitigating the burdens on caregivers should be a higher priority, whether it's a higher priority against other domestic programs or whether it's a priority vis-a-vis the defense program. We need to make sure that members of Congress are aware of the extent of the disease in American families in addition to their own, so that they in fact recognize that it's a priority for their constituents. So I'm glad that you think that our social media program is effective in reaching more people. We obviously, because we're a smaller organization, we try to use the techniques that smaller organizations use to get more information out there. We've always compared ourselves as Facebook to the association's Microsoft. Both are essential to moving digital technology and innovation forward, but they operate differently. Mm-hmm. We are smaller, so we have to operate cooperative and collaboratively. And the Alzheimer's Association operates very effectively with large resource and raising awareness and doing the other things that it does.
Well, I'd like to just throw out a suggestion to maybe be able to put in place for the next election. I have never been one who has been overly politically active, and actually my mom, who passed away 2 years ago, literally came to me in a dream and said, "You are going to caucus, girl," and you are getting involved. So I did go, and I ended up making a couple of recommendations, but I didn't really know how to write them up. And I'm just thinking, if your organization could get out to people and they would, submit those, at caucus to get in front, and then have a more specific voice versus, every caucus coming up with their own verbiage and then it having to be merged together. But if there was a set format, like you guys have done for, writing letters, to members of Congress, to get that in front and really get that as a lead goal. I don't know if that would be helpful or not. For me, as somebody new in the ball game, it would have been wonderful, and I got mine moved forward. But it was like it was a struggle because I just sat down and I had never seen that before. I didn't have a clue, but I'm like, I'm going to write something up, and I did. And so just a thought there that might be something that could blossom quite easily and have a stronger voice as a whole with similar verbiage.
Well, I think it's a great idea. I think any way that we can amplify the voices of American families about this disease, the better. So we'll take this offline, but very much like to explore with you how that might work and how we might actually, develop it further. Because it's one thing for us to send out sort of what we do and have people react, and that's been very powerful. It really has increased the sense in Congress about how many people are affected by this disease and how much they care about it. But to be able to more individualize those communications or those expressions and be able to deliver them to individual members, because we all know that these congressmen and women and senators represent particular states or districts. Anything that we can do to personalize it and to amplify American voices, not ours, but everybody else's, will be welcome. So that's worth some greater exploration.
Okay, great. While we're speaking of drugs and clinical trials, getting drugs to the people who need them is definitely a first step. But how are we even prepared to do that when FDA clears treatments to really push things through? When we also know that there's so many people that are underdiagnosed or undiagnosed with this disease.
Well, I think that's a very astute question. But you're going to have later on, I think in the next hour, Drew Holzapfel, who heads our global CEO initiative on Alzheimer's. And while he'll report on this in more detail, just the top headline is that he's done a report that outlines or reports that there are now 17 drugs in late-stage clinical trials, which are on pace to get to market within the next 5 years. So that we are maybe on the cusp of some significant innovation in the medicines in this space. And so with that, you asked the right question. So, okay, let's assume we begin to get these drugs coming through the pipeline. Is the FDA ready to assess them? Or is Medicare going to pay for any portion of those drugs? And are physicians actually in a place where they can detect and diagnose those individuals who are right for the particular medicines that are emerging? And we think the answer to that is no. One of the great challenges here is that all the drugs that have been tried in the past have been tested in people with mild to moderate disease. And the way that we have assessed whether or not those drugs work or not is whether they improve a person's ability not only to their memory, but also that they're able to better do their functional activities of daily living. Can they brush their teeth when they couldn't before? Are they able to toilet themselves when they weren't able to do that before? Well, increasingly, one of the reasons that scientists believe that, in fact, those drugs were failing was because we tested them too late in the course of the disease, after the disease may have done too much damage to the brain to actually be able to have a medicine change the course of the disease. So increasingly, we're testing medicines in people in the mild stage of Alzheimer's, or even before they're diagnosed with Alzheimer's when they have mild cognitive impairment, and even possibly before they get any symptoms of disease. Well, if that's the case, how do you test whether or not a drug is improving the functional abilities of an individual? You can't. So you have to have a standard by which you're going to judge the success of a drug based not on its ability to improve the function of a person, but to improve their memory alone, or even potentially based upon the change of some biological marker inside the body before symptoms appear. So we have a challenge in getting the regulatory system ready to evaluate those drugs. And then we have the problem of who's going to pay for these drugs, because the first drugs out, like any first product in any new area, are likely to be expensive. Is Medicare going to pay for these drugs? The answer to that is far, far from clear. The first diagnostic process that has come through the system, which was able to differentially diagnose between Alzheimer's and other causes of dementia. That is to say, dementia is a more general more general condition, and Alzheimer's is the main cause of dementia, but there are other causes of dementia. Well, amyloid PET scans was able to differentially determine whether the dementia was the result of Alzheimer's or some other disease. And Medicare has chosen, at least for the time being, not to reimburse for that, and has now required another 5-year study to determine whether or not to reimburse for the general use of that product. So we don't know whether Medicare is going to reimburse. So we have some work to do, which we're starting this year, on working with the payers around the world, but including Medicare here in the United States, to see what evidence they will want as they assess these initial medicines to reimburse for them. And then finally, doctors. The different medicines are going to be aimed at different stages of the disease, individuals at different stages of the disease, and these medicines are going to have different targets for what they're aimed at. So there are going to be some improved next-generation symptomatic drugs aimed at paranoia, aimed at hallucinations, aimed at anxiety, which are symptomatic outputs of Alzheimer's. So that will be a set of drugs. There'll be other drugs that are aimed at mild or prodromal, mild cognitive impairment populations, aimed at slowing the disease down. Well, unless you know where a person is in the course of the disease, you're not going to know whether or not a particular medicine is appropriate for them. And doctors simply do not have sufficient geriatric training yet, or training in this particular disease, to be able to detect and then diagnose appropriately the individuals with the disease. So we have work to do as we're beginning this year as well with doctors to begin to get them sort of ready, willing, and able to diagnose the disease so that we can match the medicines that are emerging with the people that need them.
Okay. Well, that's great. The other question is, and you had mentioned the price of new medications, but I know there are still so many families today just struggling to pay for medication that's actually been out for quite a while. They just it's food or medications or housing. Is Us Against Alzheimer's looking at the total economics of families impacted at all, or is that part of your legislation, or is it strictly that you're going more towards a research-based?
No, well, we are very much working on the care space as well, but we're working internationally on that to develop international care standards, and we're working as well with NIH on care research and care programs as well. We have some legislation now pending in Congress which would provide a Medicare benefit to Medicare beneficiaries diagnosed with Alzheimer's that would educate family caregivers, educate and train and provide support for family caregivers. It is at least a first step to get Medicare to recognize the caregiver burden and to begin to address it. But caregivers need more than that. They need respite care. They need in-home assistance. They need a variety of support mechanisms that they're not getting now and which we need to develop, and we need to figure out how to pay for them. You will hear from other members of our team how there is a disparate impact on the financial well-being or the physical well-being of women and minorities. And women are now the majority, and minorities in the aggregate will be the majority of this country in the coming decades, meaning that the health of our minorities is going to be the health of America. So understanding exactly how this disease not only affects women and minorities differently, but how the economic burden of this disease is affecting different segments of society is very important to understanding the projected effects on the social fabric of America. As women are drawn out of the workforce to stay home with their loved one, and as minorities who are already subject to a wide variety of health and economic disparities see the crushing burden of the costs of taking care of a loved one with dementia, we're going to see some real rending of the social fabric of the country. And so we really do need to understand these health and economic disparities, recognize these are issues of economic and social justice as well as health and economics, so that we can motivate our country to come together in ways that we've done before with other diseases, including cancer, but HIV/AIDS, polio, and others. We need to have this country come together and focus on how we can help the families that have this disease and then find a cure from the disease so that we can live a life whose health span and whose brain span equals the rest of our lifespan.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Trish, I'm going to throw a question back to you because I get this question all the time, and I'm just curious if you get this as well. People ask me, are you nervous that you're going to get the disease because your mom had it? Do you get that question from people?
A little. Yeah, I do.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, my mother, who was, the biggest worrier in the world, a raindrop meant a tsunami to her. It skipped my generation and went into my daughter. So so she still wants me to call when I get home. But I don't see any real purpose in worrying about it, and not that really stops you from worrying, but I just think we're going to solve it. Mm-hmm. I just really do. The biggest problem with Alzheimer's, I think, is that you feel so out of control. The caregiver feels so, what can we do? Although I do have some advice for that. But, and so I think we're taking reins more than just saying, oh my God. So I'm really not worried about it. Are you worried?
I'm not. I'm probably more conscious of when I miss a word, or can't find something. But I hear from all my friends they're doing the same thing.
I honestly, I can remember. I never could remember a name, and in fact, I tell my kids to wear name tags. I mean, it's just impossible for me.
Yeah.
But so I keep thinking, okay, my mother didn't remember. I didn't remember. Maybe it's not a good thing to go back to my mother didn't remember. But, never.
Yeah, so. I don't believe the whole going into the worry mode is gonna help fix anything. And we all know if you talk to anybody with dementia, they'll say stress increases their symptoms. So, and that worry is stress, if we want to admit it or not. So, and I've also chosen not to get tested. People ask me about getting tested, and I just don't think it's going to do me any good at this point,
There's nothing in it for me. I mean, so if I know, then I can become a warrior.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the thing that I think we all can do, and this may just be as a summary, but is that I'm urging, of course, people to sign up for usagainstAlzheimer's.org because numbers count in politics. So if Congress sees we have more members, they will be more responsive. So that's, and send that to your list of people. I mean, those are things we can do from our bedroom, from anywhere. And so once you take a little control, not only do you feel better, you're accomplishing something for this disease.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, you can be a worrier or you can be a warrior, what you want to be. And, kind of take your pick. And the other thing I want to mention is I go out and I speak quite a bit, and I have you guys on my list in pretty much every single talk I do about the wonderful work you're doing, and really urge people to sign up for your Alzheimer's Daily. Your newsletter is just incredible every single day.
It is. I mean, I'm so proud of it.
Yeah, and you should be.
Jason has gotten that together. It's great.
It really is.
Resendez, who is going to be on your call in an hour, next hour.
Oh, yeah. Wonderful. Well, that's great, because there's, one of the questions I always get is, what's going on with the science and where are things at? I'm like, if you really want to know, you need to subscribe to this. You need to sign up for this and get involved with this community, because they just send stuff out and it's so succinct. And if you want to dig into it, you can. And if you want to pass on to the next one, you can. But you really do a nice job highlighting. And I'm just floored at how much information is out there every single day that they pull together for us. It's just astounding. So it's wonderful. Trish, I wanted to ask you about, what's this about an Alzheimer's party? What's going on?
Yeah, well, so my role in life basically was to cancel my husband's boat. When you're in the midst of meeting and passion and everything, you don't ask all those questions you're supposed to ask. So I forgot to ask about his party affiliation. And then when I found out, I thought, well, as soon as we're married, I can, get rid of that elephant. Wrong. I mean, it was so mystifying to me because, we generally have the same values and opinions of things. But then we found our true purpose in life. In 2010, we started Us Against Alzheimer's. And so happily our goal has solved our split party problem as well, because now we are the Alzheimer's party. And just as this disease is equal opportunity, these are ours, men or women, rich or poor, we realize we're all at risk. So first I started by looking at the candidates, who has Alzheimer's in their family. And I was floored, because on the Republican side, Ben Carson, his mother, Ted Cruz, his grandmother, Donald Trump, his father, Marco Rubio, his aunt, Jeb Bush, his mother-in-law, Carly, her grandfather and father, and ex-candidate Rick Santorum, his father-in-law. So it was pretty well represented in the Republicans, which was a really hopeful sign, because, once you've seen Alzheimer's up close and personal, you've watched a loved one disappear, you pretty much know that you have to fight against this disease. But I'm also reminded, of that old advertisement, you don't have to be Jewish to love Levy's rye bread. And you don't have to have Alzheimer's in your family to know, I figured, that Alzheimer's can take down a family and a country's economy. So that's what I figured was going to happen if we didn't do something. So we actually sent, we had people at the town hall meetings at the beginning asking this question, what you're going to do. And of all the candidates, Hillary is the only one who has addressed Alzheimer's with a concrete plan. So the Alzheimer's Party loves her. She's for getting at least to $2 billion per year for research and Alzheimer's and related disorders, and for coordinating with leading researchers to ensure progress toward that treatment and alleviate the burden on Alzheimer's caregivers and protecting loved ones who wander from home. So, we're pretty crazy about her. That we asked Bernie Sanders too, and he said, "Well, everyone needs, they need money, but every disease needs money." So I was, that's on that line, and that may be true. But I went. Let me just go back a little. In 2004, we went to Hillary and said. She was very good friends with Linda Bloodworth Thomason, who created Designing Women, and I was on that show at the time, writing for that show. And the same week, Linda and I discovered our mothers had a fatal disease. My mom had Alzheimer's, and her mother had AIDS from a transfusion. So her mother was dead in 6 months, and mine in 5 years. And I said to Hillary, if that happened today, her mother would live. My mother would still die. And, it's not that I want to take anything away. I mean, HIV/AIDS was so amazing, their organization and their, because they had a voice.
Mm-hmm.
And they got money, and it's a manageable disease. You and I both know what we would have done for a manageable disease.
Yep.
So, but they're still getting $3 billion, and I don't want to take their money away, but we're not even getting $1 billion, and we have 100% debt. So we started this, and I guess what it's A, to raise awareness, and B, we have interns who are coming in for this specific election, for instance, who will try and find out from everyone who's running, every senator, every congressperson, what they're going to do about it, and we're going to also ask the people who are running against them, and let them know that pressure is there, because it is there, because this isn't just who's going to complain about who eats better. It's going to it's a life or death situation. So we want to do that. We want to raise that awareness, and we want to keep going after this election. I mean, this is, to us, it's really important. It's a communications tool. It roots our advocacy message. It integrates all the work underway on the Hill, and will provide an opportunity to rally grassroots advocates in congressional, districts. So I know I'm probably rambling, but I just know that we need it, because we need to look at the issues that matter, and to us, at this time, this matters.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, did I answer that?
No, you did. You did. I had no idea that the Alzheimer's Party was politically, slanted there. I thought maybe we were doing some kind of gala and we're just calling it something else. So that was all new.
We'll eventually do that. to celebrate its demise. But no, I mean, we're getting in the action. I mean, we have to be there. We have to be able to say we did something. So that's what the Alzheimer's Party is.
Yep. So is there an actual Alzheimer's Party that people can sign up for to be part of a petition? Or
Yes, go on usagainstAlzheimer.org.
Okay.
We have everything there. We don't only send out messages every day, although that is in of itself enough of a reason to exist. But this is when you can. I want people in every state to be writing to their congressional people and saying, "What are you doing?"
Mm-hmm.
That's when Congress reacts. I mean, the reality is we have to put it in Congress's hand because, who's going to give $2 billion? Not too many people here.
Yep.
So they're the ones who can control that.
Okay.
So
Okay,
Yes.
so
And then we'll have a party, I promise.
okay, so if somebody goes to your site, would they go to the sign the petition under the take the action then?
They can. They absolutely can do that. But they can also, if they can't figure out who their representative or senator is,
Mm-hmm.
write to us. We will let you know. We'll let you know how to contact them. I mean, this is what you can do.
Okay. Okay, wonderful. Well, that's
sorry, my passion overcomes me.
no. That's I love talking to people that love what they do, because it gives me hope that things are actually going to change and we're going to make a difference out there.
It will. You keep up your radio program. We'll do our
Yeah,
too.
well,
I mean, your radio program is amazing.
Wonderful. George, is there any last point that you want to make before we transition over to some of your subgroups at all?
The only point I'd make, and it's probably not that relevant to your audience, is the fact this is a global problem.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, while we have maybe 5 to 5.5 million people in this country that are estimated to have the disease, it's almost 50 million people globally, with well over 100 million caregivers. In the coming decades, it will be over 100 million people, close to 140 million people with the disease, and 500 million caregivers. And what that means is, in absolute numbers, people dying at a rate greater than the Black Death, right? We're going to experience this disease globally in a way that will simply destroy the economic, it will have a serious effect on global economic growth and family structures around the world, on the empowerment of women. And while we focus in this country with all of its resources on what we need to do here, we've got to recognize to some extent that the United States has always taken the lead in terms of solving the world's health problems, whether it's Ebola or Zika or polio or HIV/AIDS. The United States has taken a lead globally. The United States has not taken a lead globally on Alzheimer's. It has the ability to do so. It is the largest investor in the research globally. It has a plan in place that was a model for other countries, and yet the United States has not stepped up. So we do have to remember, as important as it is to every American family, important it is to one's own family, there are 10 times as many people affected by this in the world than Americans. And so that's why there is a global attention to the disease, but it is also why it is important that the United States be the leader, solve the disease here. By solving the disease here, it will solve it for hundreds of millions of people globally in the coming decades.
Wonderful.
And we do say, if you think research is expensive, try disease.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth? And I'm glad you brought that point up, George, because actually our listeners are international, so they will love that they were included in this conversation as well, because we have people all over that we interview and that listen to the show, that follow us. So thank you so much. And none of us are in this alone. This is a global effort, and it needs to be, because there's so much information and research out there, like you said, that needs to be shared so that we can, push ourselves up the hill and over the mountain and come out the other side. So thank you both so much for spending this first hour with us. We look forward to wrapping up with you at the end of our second hour here. I'm just going to do a couple of shout-outs for some information here. If you didn't get a chance to watch the last Dementia Chats, I would encourage you to do so. We had a great conversation this morning. I will be getting that video out later today or tomorrow, the recording. And on this one, we talked about relationships and the sacrifice that goes on both for the care partner and the person who is diagnosed, and how that is perceived, and how we need to have those conversations to make sure that we are nurturing our relationships and that we don't let the disease take that from us. You can get all of the past Dementia Chats recordings on AlzheimerSpeaks.com. Just go to our Initiations and Projects tab, and from there you'll see the recordings for the Dementia Chats, which are free webinars we do twice a month on the second and fourth Tuesday every morning. And again, if you can't make it live, you can always watch them later. I also wanted to just give a shout out. I've been traveling around a little bit. I was down with Autumn Leaves in Texas for a week, and we did several screenings of the wonderful Hollywood film His Neighbor Phil, and just got a marvelous response from the community there. I was out in Wilmer, Minnesota for an all-day conference where we also did a screening of the film, and then recently out at the Job Corps. And if you haven't had a chance to see that film, I encourage you to reach out to myself or one of the other sponsors who has that available to be able to show. I'll be in Tyler, Texas, actually tomorrow, going down there for a caregiver survival camp. So if you're in the area, please swing by and talk with the Alzheimer's Alliance of Smith County in Tyler, Texas. I would love to meet up with you down there if you're out and about. What else did I want to point out? Our last radio show, we had Dr. Richard Isaacson on. He talked about the Alzheimer's diet. We also had Kathy Borey on last week, the author of The Long Hello, which just got picked up here in the U.S., so that was very exciting. And then next week we are going to have Dee Dee Footer, who is going to be on, and she's going to talk about her personal experience about caring for her dad, who had dementia. And we always just love hearing that authentic voice of those in the trenches and how they gracefully and graciously maneuvered through things, and then so lovely to share their own stories and lessons learned through the process. I just think that's just such a nice way for us to give a hand up to one another, because we all know something more than the next guy and a lot less than somebody else. And but it's all about sharing knowledge and being collaborative and removing that fear of telling our stories, because our stories are so powerful out there. I also want to give a shout out to the Caregiver Alert Center. If you are not familiar with them, you can go to our homepage and just click on the logo there. This is a wonderful route for people to just have some reassurance in case their loved one would go and wander. It's only $15 a year. They pull a poster together. They work with the police department. I know there's a lot of GPS and other avenues and alarms and stuff, but so many families can't afford that. And this poster can get disseminated within 10 minutes and get out to the public, and it's just a nice reassurance. You can also use the system. They have one actually for pets if you've got grandchildren, all kinds of things. So I just think it's really slick. I have used it personally, again, called the Caregiver Alert Center. And if you go through our webpage, you'll also get a discount on that. Here on Alive and Social, I'd love to give a shout out just to Drew Applebaum and Scott. They're a father and son team who discuss sports, and you can find out if Fathers Knows Best. Their show is live Monday at 2:30. And I think that's it for announcements for right now. So why don't we go ahead and continue the conversation, and we're going to get into some of the specialty groups that Us Against Alzheimer's has. So the first person I'd like to introduce is Jason Resendez, and he directs the Latinos Against Alzheimer's Network and Coalition, and the nation's first national initiative to activate Latino health policy and community stakeholders to fight against Alzheimer's and other dementias. Previously, Jason served as the senior manager of strategic partners at the National Council of La Raza, and that's the NCLR, which is the nation's largest Latino advocacy organization. So welcome, Jason. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, first, I have to go kudos for the newsletter. I didn't know that was coming from you. Like I said, I just rave about this thing all the time. I personally,
Thank you.
I have to admit, I don't have time to read it all, but I'm just flabbergasted at what you pull together every single day to keep us updated on what's going on. I really feel like if I need information, I know exactly where to go. You know, you're the
well, thank you. That means a lot to us, and that's why we started the product. Was because so many folks throughout the country at all different levels, whether they're policy folks or caregivers or folks who have been impacted by the disease to researchers. There's just so many different kinds of things happening in the Alzheimer's space that in some ways are interconnected. But there wasn't really a great place to go and find all of it, and especially in a curated manner. So it was really a foresight of Us Against Alzheimer's to put that product together. And it just really goes to show how much interest there is and how much information there is about this disease as the impact of it grows on our country and our families and communities.
Well, it's wonderful. I don't know if you guys are listed for your newsletter in Alzheimer's Speaks resource directory, but I should check into that because we should definitely get you in
oh, wonderful.
there
yeah, we appreciate
for people. That. And, anybody can list their resources in there. It's just a general, mining of information. That was one of the struggles, I guess, I felt, as a daughter, that I didn't know where to go. I didn't know. I knew that there had to be more out there, but I just didn't know how to find it. And I think there's so many organizations and then individuals just doing great work that the voice just has to be raised. So thank you so much for what you're doing. Jason, why don't you tell us why it's important to raise awareness of Alzheimer's and dementia in the Latino community?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. And I think George did a great job of alluding to it earlier, talking about the future health of our nation really depends on the health of our minority groups, Latinos, African American, and also women, obviously. And as we think about the Latino community and what it looks like now, the popular perception is, the young millennial, the folks that we want to sell cars to, we want to sell, consumer products to, iPhones, et cetera. But really, the flip side of that is that the Latino older adult population is the most rapidly aging population. Between now and 2030, the Latino older adult population, 65 and older, will grow 224%, compared to 65% growth for the non-Latino white population. And the number one risk factor for Alzheimer's is advanced age. So this is increasingly becoming a Latino public health issue that needs to be addressed. So one is just the sheer numbers that we're going to see over the coming decades of Latinos struggling with Alzheimer's. But then two, Latinos are 1.5 times more likely to get Alzheimer's than non-Latino whites for a number of reasons. So one, we're just demographically at risk for the disease, but then two, because of other health factors like cardiovascular disease, the diabetes, Latinos are 65% more likely to be diabetic, 45% more likely to die from diabetes, 15% more likely to be obese. These are all metabolic risk factors that increase your chances of getting Alzheimer's. So there's a lot of factors that come to play to really make this an important issue for Latinos to be aware of, and for public health and policymakers to really think about how this disease is particularly impacting this population.
Okay. I want to just ask you culturally, how receptive is the Latino culture in terms of talking about this? Because I know with certain cultures, it's not on the table. It's not a comfortable thing to discuss.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. I think, it really is a case by family, but generally in terms of research that's been done, one of our coalition members, the National Hispanic Council on Aging, has done some qualitative research in this area. and found that overwhelmingly Latinos lack an awareness of Alzheimer's as a disease. They might recognize some symptoms, but they don't associate, the family of or a set of symptoms as being associated with Alzheimer's. They're more likely to attribute it to old age or, grandma's just getting old. So there's an overwhelming lack of awareness of Alzheimer's as a disease, as something that's separate from normal aging. And so that's a big complicating factor. But then on top of that, when you do start recognizing the issue, there's a lot of stigma, cultural stigma associated with the disease, where folks in this qualitative study, thought this might be a punishment from God or a punishment for things that they've done in the past. So there's definitely a lot of stigma associated with the disease. There's a lot of misunderstanding associated with the disease in the Latino community, but it's something that we're having to deal with more and more. Latino communities tend more likely to be intergenerational. So we're seeing more and more Latino households being comprised of, kids, parents, and then also maybe a grandfather, grandmother, older adults in the family. So as that grows, I think this is an issue we're going to have to become more familiar and face head on.
Okay. Is it something at all that you're approaching in school-age children?
That's a great question. We haven't, that's not been a focus of the Latino network, but I think that's a really interesting proposition that we should look into. We've been trying to really frame this disease as a family disease, and that's something that you'll hear from my colleagues, and definitely Trish and George's experience. Highlight how one person might get this disease, but it really does impact an entire family across generations, and that's particularly true of the Latino community. So we're trying to frame this as a family disease that conversation needs to happen as a family, and that treatment needs to happen as a family. And there are other opportunities to engage as a family as well, and that could include clinical trial research, for example. So the idea of getting, school-age kids, we're looking at millennials sort of having that conversation about, things you might be noticing with your mom or dad or grandfather. But I think that same principle can apply with younger students as well.
Yeah, the reason I ask is I used to go out, and I haven't for many years now, but I used to go out and talk with junior high and high school students, and I started out just kind of talking about aging, and then we got into, dementia as a whole, and we did a lot of very interactive things, but then one of the questions I would pose is, how many of you have been touched by this, and how many, is caring for somebody in their own home? Well, the family dynamics changed significantly, and what I found was these kids really want to help, and from all cultures, but that nobody is telling them what's really going on. And I just think that, kids are just such a powerhouse. They're such a force. I mean, they got us to quit smoking and buckle up and, because of their knowledge and what they learned. And I just think that they would be a great seed to feed, to get information into the families and to be able to educate from a different angle. Sometimes. And so I just throw that out there for whatever reason. Can you explain to our audience, why it's so important to have diversity in clinical trials? Because I hear this all the time from people. Well, we don't meet the criteria. We don't meet the criteria. How does that impact the Latino population?
Sure. Well, one, it's very important to have diversity in clinical trials for a couple of reasons. One, we want to make sure that when a treatment or a drug is developed, that drug or treatment works across communities. It works the same with someone who, has a 4-year college degree, and it works the same in someone who, might not have completed high school. We want to make sure that development, that treatments and drugs work for all communities, so Latinos, African Americans, whites, et cetera. So it's important that during that drug development process that diversity is prioritized so that we have, products that are effective across the board. So I think that's really important. And, like you alluded to, that does change kind of the trial design, because so many Latinos, like I mentioned, before have a higher risk for having diabetes, and so you might be screened out of that. So really taking into account those comorbidities when you're designing a clinical trial is important, and thinking about that. The other reason is just the sheer numbers. And George and Drew can talk about this specifically, but the number of folks that we need in clinical trials is overwhelming. And if you're thinking about how we can recruit more individuals, one of those potential pools of applicants is the growing Latino community. There are 55 million Latinos across the United States. That's a huge applicant or huge pool of potential trial participants if we can just tap into it, and that'll enable us to develop drugs faster and more effectively. So I think that's another big reason why we need to really unlock the diversity puzzle, is because we'll just be able to access so many more potential participants in trials.
Okay. What kinds of resources do you feel need to be in place to really address this growing impact of Alzheimer's and dementia on the Latino community? What are we lacking and what's there working?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the things that folks have been working on for the past several decades has been really thinking about how to better develop culturally tailored information for Latinos and also African Americans and other communities about Alzheimer's and dementia. So, and clearly, given the low diagnosis rates among Latinos and other minorities, that material hasn't been completely effective in terms of pushing it out and getting it into the hands of folks. So I think that's one area we can do a better job of, is really thinking through the awareness piece and sort of how we're talking to individuals, and what channels that we're trying to push this information out to reach Latinos and other minorities. I think that's key. The other piece is, better engaging minority serving physicians. Minority physicians and minority serving physicians, and also minority specialists. So making sure that primary care physicians in the Latino community and other minority communities are educated about Alzheimer's and treatment options, in addition to being educated about clinical trial opportunities and being able to provide treatment and options to minority communities regarding the disease is important. That's Latino, lower income individuals are less likely to engage in the primary health system than others due to economic situations, et cetera. But once they do, making sure that those folks are engaging with are educated and aware of Alzheimer's. The same thing with focusing on engaging local health clinics, because you might not have a primary health physician. A lot of lower income minority, particularly in the Latino community, will interact with a local health clinic, a community-based health clinic, and making sure that network is educated and aware of Alzheimer's, and particularly that this disease impacts Latinos at a higher rate than other communities. That's been one of the main things that I've realized working on this issue going into it, was that there's just folks don't understand that this is a disease that Latinos are at higher risk of. And so really making that a priority and educating the appropriate stakeholders, not just on the health side, but also on the policy side and the research side, is vital to addressing the problem.
Okay. So if we've got any listeners who want to get involved, can they just reach out to you on Us Against Alzheimer's if they would like to become part of the Latino network?
Just certainly. Latinos, you can go to usagainstAlzheimers.org, and then there's a drop-down bar for our networks, or you can go directly to LatinosAgainstAlzheimers.org, and you can sign up to get information about our network and the work that we're doing throughout the country.
Are there other ways that people can contribute to your efforts?
Yes, if you are a listener and you work in a minority community or a city where has a strong minority population, and you work for a nonprofit advocacy organization, we're continuously expanding the Latinos Against Alzheimer's Coalition, which is the first coalition of organizations coming together and recognizing that Alzheimer's is an urgent health issue in the Latino community, and approaching it the same way that they've approached HIV/AIDS, cancer, heart disease, et cetera. So we have a coalition of leading national and also local Latino-serving, minority-serving institutions, and we'd love to expand that. So if folks are interested and think that their organization that they represent might be appropriate, please feel free to reach out via our website.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us, Jason, and updating us on your initiative there. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next, I want to introduce Drew Holzapfel, and he serves as the Executive Director of the Global CEO Initiative on Alzheimer's Disease. And this is a coalition of the private sector leaders from pharma and biotech and finances and healthcare. And prior to joining the initiative, Drew was at Pfizer working on the company's Alzheimer's pipeline strategy and in the commercial development for late-stage compounds. So welcome, Drew.
Well, thank you.
Well, I'm excited to learn more about your global initiative in this private sector. So can you tell us first a little bit about what are some of the current treatments for Alzheimer's and what does the future look like?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, and thanks for the opportunity today. This has been a great program, and it's great to be involved. So in terms of current treatments in the U.S. today, there are 5 drugs on market that address the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. These drugs provide meaningful relief to patients and caregivers, but unfortunately, it's only temporary. They usually last about 6 to 9 months. So obviously, this is too short. We definitely need new weapons in this fight, and we've not had a new novel drug on market in over a decade. So really, when you look at it, in the last 100 years since the disease was first characterized, we've had little improvement. I think as George mentioned, the treatment landscape moving forward looks pretty good. And just to reiterate, the report released last month by Researchers Against Alzheimer's Disease, which is a network of Us Against Alzheimer's, there are 17 drugs that might make it into the market in the next 5 years. And so if you want to see this report and see the breakdown, you can visit the Researchers Against Alzheimer's network page on usagainstAlzheimers.org. So while I did say that the outlook, I think, is pretty good, the caveat here is that given the history with Alzheimer's disease, all bets are off. We've had less than 1% success rate in drug development in Alzheimer's disease, according to an analysis by Jeff Cummings at Cleveland Clinic. This is really low. It's a low even for a generally low success rate in drug development. But again, we do have renewed optimism with a robust late-stage pipeline. And what's really important about this next wave of innovation is it might be able to attack the disease in new ways. So what do I mean when I say attack the disease in new ways? These late-stage compounds could delay or slow the progression of the disease. So the benefit to the patient really is that they maintain independence, are able to live alone longer. It also decreases the need for caregiver support. And one other example to show what this really means in this next wave of innovation comes from an analysis by the Lewin Group. A treatment that would be introduced in 2025 that delays the onset of Alzheimer's by 5 years would reduce the number of people with the disease by over 5 million by mid-century. So that's not just important in terms of the number of people decreasing with the disease, but it equally is staggering is that it would save the system over $200 billion within the first 5 years. So if all goes well, the future could mean new options and lower care costs.
Well, that would be nice. We'd all be lining up for that one. That's for sure. What do you think needs to change to really improve our chances of successful drug development as a whole?
Well, I'm going to pick up on a couple of themes that George and Trish and Jason hit. And really the way I see it, it's pretty simple. We need more money and we need more people like the Vradenburgs. So in other words, we need increased investment and we need a change in attitudes. When we invest in diseases at appropriate levels, we make great strides. And if you take oncology, for example, where we're spending in the U.S. $6 billion a year on oncology research, really started with an important effort launched by President Nixon when he declared war on cancer. And since that war on cancer, we've seen hundreds of drugs. According to the National Cancer Institute, there are over 200 drugs in oncology. So we need that type of investment. And I think Trish hit the nail on the head. We don't see this as a zero-sum game. We just see it spending levels that match the impact of the disease. So and the second piece is we need a change in attitudes. I think that's why programs like yours are so important. The stigma of this disease really sidelines both the patient with the disease and caregivers. And while we've talked a lot about HIV/AIDS and the model of activism, we might not start chaining ourselves to the White House gates, but we do need more people demanding government action. And I think of all the public examples of support for disease, and I'd love to see more of those public examples for Alzheimer's. When you watch the National Football League in the fall, you see for a whole month players wearing pink to showcase their support for breast cancer. When you look at breast cancer walks, you see the survivors who walk for 3 days to raise money and attention. As the point's been made, Alzheimer's, there are no survivors, and the caregivers are stretched. So I think what we need is to really think about how we can continue to shine a light on this disease and make sure that the people with the disease feel supported and that we're speaking out with them.
Mm-hmm. Which makes a lot of sense. Can you tell us what countries are leading in terms of the global effort to stop the disease by 2025, and what are they doing to be considered a leader?
Yeah, so I think on the country level and on the regional level, there are some pockets of best practices. And I think the hope is by seeing these best practices that they spread to other countries and regions. But the two most notable examples of leadership both within a country, within a region, and also globally are France and the UK. And what's important in both of these examples is that the head of state has made this a top priority, has made Alzheimer's disease a top priority. And this type of leadership really does get results, and it stimulates actions from individuals to institutions to branches of government and globally. The most recent example is Prime Minister Cameron's leadership in the UK. And the tangible examples of his commitment has been, one, increased funding from government, and that's important. But two, increased donations from the public. The Alzheimer's Society UK's research budget has grown fivefold since Cameron declared his efforts on Alzheimer's disease. And three, it means people are being trained to be inclusive of people living with the disease. So now in the UK, there are hundreds of thousands of people who are designated dementia friends. And last, and I think as important as any of these examples, is you're seeing an increase in participation in research. So people are signing up for clinical trials at a faster clip than they were previously. And I think, as Jason pointed out, this will dramatically increase the speed at which drugs are developed. So I think these are great results and provide models for other governments and other world leaders.
Agree. It's amazing when I go out and speak, everyone just thinks that we are leading the pack, with dementia. And people are just kind of shocked at what other countries are doing out there. And so it's just an interesting conversation. And I think people are really taken back because so many more people are touched by this than what they really, have an everyday conversation about. So it's good to hear that. When do you expect to actually see a cure from Alzheimer's research and so it actually hits the market?
Well, I just before I answer that question, I just want to return to your point, and I think there's obviously more that can be done in the U.S. It was alluded to earlier that NAPA, the Federal Advisory Group focused on Alzheimer's disease, that's a really important effort. And when you look at Alzheimer's research across the globe, the U.S. is the number one funder of Alzheimer's research. So there's always more that can be done, but there has been leadership in the U.S. that's produced results. So I think it's important to note as we all fight this fight together. But just turning to your question at hand here is about a cure. In the history of medicine, we've had very few diseases that we've cured. So as I look at the near-term horizon for a cure for Alzheimer's, unfortunately, without something unprecedented or unexpected, I don't see one. But there are two important things that will keep us on the path to finding a cure. And they've been made by the previous presenters. But just to reiterate, the number one thing is that payers really need to embrace this next generation of treatment. So without access to the innovations that are on the verge of making it into the clinic or onto the market, we won't make any progress. So that's an important point. And then two, it's participation in research. And while I don't want to make the point that you should sign up expecting to receive a cure, it is your commitment in your time that you spend participating in research that will build a foundation and really drive us forward.
Okay, great. Anything else that you'd like to add? I want to make sure that we have time to, talk to the others on the line as well. But is there anything that I didn't touch on that you think is critical for our audience to know, Drew?
Well, I think just the closing point is when we look at the companies that are part of the Global CEO Initiative on Alzheimer's disease that are committed to changing the way that Alzheimer's is approached, this really is a patient-driven corporate coalition. So we work closely with individuals affected by the disease, caregivers, companies, governments, international organizations, and NGOs. So we want to build a big tent, and we really appreciate the companies that have supported us and are driving us forward.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time, Drew. And if people,
thank you.
If we've got some CEOs out there that are interested in becoming part of your group, is that something that is still open that they could get involved in?
We would absolutely welcome their participation, and they can visit our website and send us an email through the website.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Our next guest is Jill Lesser, and Jill is the president of Women Against Alzheimer's, and she was motivated by her own personal experiences as a care partner to her mother with Alzheimer's disease, and she brings her passion and dedication to the cause, which we've heard kind of as a theme from everybody that we've talked to so far. Jill joined the board of Us Against Alzheimer's, which is the nonprofit organization dedicated to stopping the disease, and now as president of the Women's Network. Her focus is really to amplify the voice of powerful voices of women. And, because this group is so largely affected both as being, diagnosed and also as caring for others. So her organization really gives women a platform to speak up and advocate for research funding and promote research challenges to help find a cure. So welcome, Jill.
Thank you.
Well, I'm excited to hear more about Women Against Alzheimer's. And how did this spinoff happen? Was it prior to you coming, or were you one of the leaders in saying, hey, we need a separate group here?
Yeah, so it actually, so I've been on the board of Us Against Alzheimer's since its founding, as George said, and we, as an organization and under George and Trish's leadership, quickly realized the importance of speaking to and for groups that are particularly underrepresented in the advocacy around Alzheimer's and over-impacted. And, you've heard from my colleague Jason about Latinos Against Alzheimer's, and in our case, Women Against Alzheimer's was founded about 4 years ago. It really was, not surprisingly, given the discussion you had in our first hour, the brainchild of Trish Vradenburg, Meryl Comer, who George mentioned as another founder of the organization, and myself, as we realized really two things. One is the sort of unbelievable impact on women as both patients and caregivers of this disease, and the need to focus on Alzheimer's as a women's disease, and in particular as a women's health crisis and a women's economic crisis. And then secondly, we know from a number of other examples that when women embrace an issue and care about it, that women change the world. And so built on those two premises, we felt strongly about the need to have a women's network. And then over the last year, as I got more involved in the day-to-day work as president of Women Against Alzheimer's, we launched our We Won't Wait campaign that is really intended to take this work to the next level.
Okay. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about the We Won't Wait?
Absolutely. So the We Won't Wait campaign is, again, under the same premise of this being a critical issue for women, and not just women who already think about Alzheimer's. So there are certainly lots of advocacy organizations that think about health and think about Alzheimer's, and our goal is to really expand the audience who understands that this is a multi-generational disease, number one, that it affects, in my case, as an example, it has affected my children since they were very, very young. It has certainly affected me and my ability to remain in the workforce while I'm caring for my mother, and it goes without saying that it has obviously affected my mother in a very profound way. And so it really is a lifelong issue for women. It also, as I referenced before, in terms of my ability to stay in the workplace, it is really an economic justice issue for women. And we believe that women's organizations that have been fighting for women's rights across the board, not just in the health space, but in equity space, in talking about, family leave and the kinds of policies that corporations and the government has to acknowledge the needs of women, really need to get involved in this effort. And so the We Won't Wait campaign is an effort to call attention to the disease and expand those people who think, this is something that may affect me, it may affect my family, it may affect my friends. And we certainly have not had trouble finding those people. And in virtually every case have found that organizations and individuals who have not previously thought of Alzheimer's as something that directly affects them really do see just how important it is. And we have sort of undertaken a multi-pillared approach in terms of our working towards making change. And I think George and Trish very articulately laid out the theory for this organization, which is advocacy and working with policymakers, but also being the change. And our model is the same. So our pillars include more money for research, but importantly, focusing on sex-based research and the importance of the examination of women's brains, not just in clinical research, but in basic and translational research as well. And I think all of us who are women know that it doesn't really take a lot of research to have us understand that women's and men's brains are different. And so it is not that difficult to sort of make the jump that we really do need to be looking at women's brains as we're putting more resources into the study of neuroscience and brains generally. Our second pillar, as I already articulated, is around economic justice and the changes in policy that we need to see to support, in particular, the millions of caregivers across a variety of different age groups, and how we can advocate for policy change around those kinds of policies. I think the third category, and I'm sort of condensing our pillars, falls into the category of what I will call brain health and diagnosis and access to clinical trials. And I think as we have seen the evolution of our conversations broadly in the United States and around the world about cancer, what we really have to see is the courage to have honest conversations about dementia, about the risks, about what we can do, about the importance of seeking diagnosis, of why diagnosis is likely to lead to the best outcome in terms of making sure you can sort of stave off symptoms, that you can keep your function up, that you can get into clinical trials and contribute to finding a cure, and that we sort of take the fear out of it, because if we don't take the fear out of it, we're ultimately not going to make progress.
Mm-hmm. Which makes a ton of sense. How are you connecting with women, and what kind of response are you getting from them?
So we're connecting with women in two different ways, and I encourage all of your listeners, as others have, to visit us on the web, either through Us Against Alzheimer's or directly Women Against Alzheimer's, and join our We Won't Wait campaign. So we're beginning to connect with women directly to join the campaign and join us in our policy agenda and our advocacy work. We are also doing a lot of outreach as a small organization. One of the best ways for us to leverage our impact is to work through partners, and that is why much of our outreach and engagement over the last several months has been in bringing together organizations that already have a large constituency focused on women, and then we partner with them to get our messages out, and many of those relationships are symbiotic, but we have care relationships, we have relationships with women's groups that are working on economic issues, we are working with across diseases on women's health, we are working with organizations that bring women together around many kinds of social issues, and we are partnering with a number of caring organizations as well that bring expertise to the table around caregiving, and that allows us to both connect with organizations that can provide additional information that's practical to our female audience, because we certainly want to be providing that kind of information as well, but allows us to then have a broader audience around some of our advocacy.
Okay, wonderful. Is there anything that we haven't touched base on that you really feel our audience needs to hear about Women Against Alzheimer's?
I feel like I have touched on it, but the only thing I would say sort of goes back to something that we talked about in the beginning of the conversation, and I think it was either something that you said or that Trish said, and that is that what we want to build with the We Won't Wait campaign is an army of warriors. And we know there are a lot of people who are in the thick of it and who are either, full up because they're caregivers or they have mild impairment themselves, or they're worried, as we talked about getting the disease. But we really believe, as we've looked across the environment of other efforts where women have really made a change and said sort of enough is enough, that we really hope that working not only with the Women's Network, but also with Jason and the Latinos Against Alzheimer's Network, with Stephanie Monroe, our leader on African Americans Against Alzheimer's, and all of our networks under the Us Against Alzheimer's umbrella, that we really can create a campaign of warriors and make a change.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for being part of the show, Jill. And I encourage any women out there listening to go to Us Against Alzheimer's and sign up for the group. Become one of those warriors. Raise the voice. It would be wonderful to hear you. Next, I am going to introduce Ginny Biggar. She directs the Patient and Caregiver and Faith initiatives with Us Against Alzheimer's. And Ginny brings over 20 years of media and communication experience as a writer, a reporter, and a filmmaker to the organization itself. Ginny was a reporter for the National Public Radio in Los Angeles and also in Washington, D.C. Prior to joining Us Against Alzheimer. So welcome, Ginny.
Oh, Lori, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Well, thanks for joining us. Looking forward to hearing from you, what the patient and caregiver networks are that you're currently leading, and what do they look like, and how can people get involved?
Well, I think, my work is, I'm just listening to my colleagues who are directing networks, and I do as well. I think the patient and caregiver work, I would say, kind of comes under the activist network, which, you're really a founding member of that network, and our connection goes several years back. So the patient and caregiver work that I think I'm most focused on right now is our Facebook caregiver support group, which I know you're familiar with, and it's a closed caregiver support group, a platform for people to ask pressing questions, to share information, to vent, which happens a lot, and we've got really wonderful moderators, Ann Napleton, Mara Batonis, Loretta Woodward-Vini, so some great women who are leading that group, which has about 5,000 members right now. Also working with Greg O'Brien, who I'm sure you know, is the author of On Pluto. He's a journalist, a storyteller extraordinaire, working on a podcast that will really highlight his patient voice, as it were. And then the other big project that I've really just started is the A-List 1000. And this is something I look forward to letting you, sort of keeping you updated on as this work moves forward. But it's going to be an online Alzheimer's and dementia community that will inform research and will validate the real-life insights of dementia caregivers and those living with dementia. So the A-List 1000 will be patients and caregivers, and it's an opportunity for them to inform research, to have their experiences validated, and for researchers also to learn from families, who are living with the disease, the biggest challenges, what they care most about with regard to treatments and the caregiver experience. So I'm really excited about the A-List 1000, and that's just getting underway. So I'd say this is the three main initiatives that I'm working on right now.
Wow, I'm really excited about the A-List 1000. I think that is going to just elevate things to a whole new level, which
I hope so.
Which is wonderful.
I hope so.
Wonderful to be able to do. Aside from raising awareness about Alzheimer's, how do the voices and experiences of those diagnosed and their care partners, family and friends, how's the best way for them to work with you at Us Against Alzheimer's, and why are they important to your organization?
Well, I mean, the patients or people with Alzheimer's and their caregivers and their families are the most powerful advocates. Whether we're fighting for more research, funding, or policies related to caregiver support, the people who are experiencing it have, the most credibility, the most powerful voices. I mean, they're certainly not the only ones, but certainly anyone affected by the disease can be part of Us Against Alzheimer's, and we provide opportunities to contact members of Congress to speak out and take action to, move the ball down the field toward a prevention or cure. So, there's that kind of involvement, just individuals who can be part of it. We also have other opportunities like the A-List 1000. And we also work closely with patients and caregivers to provide opportunities to speak to members of Congress directly, for example. My colleague Jason Resendez, who we heard from, recently visited key members of Congress with an advocate named Daisy Duarte, who came to Washington and just she moved people to tears, the senators, the congressmen that she met with. So there's just really no substitute for that first-person story. And so I think that experience has to inform all of what we do, and we try to provide opportunities for those individuals to be part of the solution.
And I love that. I think so many times people who are in the trenches, don't realize the power of one. And they don't realize the power and the authenticity of their story and how that can trigger passion in others. And the ripple effect, just like this disease, has a huge ripple effect. It's not a disease of one; it's a disease of society, and it just ripples out. Those stories ripple out; they move people to action. And I'm glad that you're empowering that group. Can you tell us too a little bit about the Clergy Against Alzheimer's and how the faith-based community has really done some cool stuff within your organization as well?
Yeah, well, we really cover all the bases, I think. We started, the Clergy Network is a multi-faith national network of clergy and faith leaders that have come together to raise their voices for, in support of families and to Alzheimer's. And then the Faith United Against Alzheimer's Coalition really kind of has stemmed from that, and we started that about a year ago in partnership with the United Methodist Church, and we have additional partners: Volunteers in America, Healthcare Chaplaincy Network, Presbyterian Homes. These are big organizations that can speak out and just take very powerful action around Alzheimer's. So, I think that faith communities are seeing so much dementia in the pews, in their congregations, and so are really scrambling in many cases to take steps to support families. A lot of congregations are doing incredible work as well in a variety of different ways. And so also I think faith leaders are just a very powerful voice, and I think, my colleague Jill Lesser, they're really focused on Alzheimer's as an economic justice issue, and I think it really is a social justice issue, and that for faith leaders that resonates. And again, just a very powerful voice that can't be ignored. And they reach a lot of people, so we can empower a lot of people. We can help a lot of people by enlisting and working with these faith organizations and leaders.
Wonderful. And so in order for people to get involved in either the activist role or the faith community, again, they can go to Us on Alzheimer's and connect with you through that role. Anything else that you want to touch base on there, Ginny?
I would just say the one thing I'll mention, the most recent project of the Clergy Network is the new Leader's Guide for Seasons of Caring. And you probably remember Seasons of Caring published a year ago, a book of interfaith meditations for Alzheimer's and dementia caregivers. So the Leader's Guide builds on that. It's an ancillary by Dr. Richard Morgan, just a brilliant man and compassionate, pastor, and it's guidance for support groups that are based on Seasons of Caring. So it's a 10-week support group that any community, any congregation can immediately put that into action. So that's just published a month ago. So very excited about that.
Oh, very cool.
And that's it. Yeah. Thank you so much, Lori.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and pull George and Trish back in to the conversation. And boy, the two of you must be awfully proud of what you've built in the last 5.5 years and all that you've accomplished in really a very short period of time. You are really changing the face and the direction of the disease, of the research, of how families cope, and really pulling people together. One of your groups, so that we weren't able to have on today just because of scheduling conflict, was the African Americans, against Alzheimer's. And Trish, do you want to just speak to a couple words about that if people want to get involved regarding that program?
Again, that's under UsAgainstAlzheimer's.org, and there it is. African Americans and other blacks are twice as likely to have Alzheimer's as Caucasians, and women are two-thirds of those 5.5 million are women, and it's Hispanics are 1.5 times as likely. I mean, but we have to remember that this is not a natural function of aging. I mean, there are 250,000. That's a lot of people who are early onset, and that's anywhere from 40 to 64, 65. So yeah, I mean, what a group, huh? That you've talked to. I mean, all dedicated to this cause. I can't tell you how honored we are and happy we are that you have had us on, Lori. I mean,
well, you're just doing fantastic work. One of the things that we didn't mention that we need to give a plug for is your Alzheimer's talks that you do, because they are just a wonderful resource and such a variety. I guess we did touch on them a little bit, but
we also have researchers against Alzheimer's. I'm looking to get in touch with Tony Orlando, if anyone knows him, so that we can have, tie a purple ribbon around your old oak tree. I want to see ribbons of purple throughout this country, so the silent voice will no longer be silent.
Yeah, maybe we have to tap into Prince, and his legacy.
I think we have a better shot at Tony Orlando.
Yeah, probably. I'm from Minnesota, and it was quite the Purple Festival here with the sky. Not only did the sky literally turn purple with a storm, but our bridges and our buildings, it's still going on. It's quite. Been really something. George, do you have anything that you would like to wrap up with? Anything that we haven't discussed in this last 2 hours?
Well, I would just say that we have every year, but it's grown every year, a national summit on Alzheimer's. It will be September 27 to 29. It will involve a great deal of focus on the disparate impact of this disease on women and minorities, but it will also bring together all of the stakeholders that are so essential to getting us to a means of prevention and treatment by 2025, which is our national goal, indeed a national goal that's been embraced by the G8 and the World Health Organization. So that also entails an Out of the Shadows dinner at which Laura Bush is going to keynote, and where we're honoring Nancy Pelosi and Eli Lilly for their championship in quite different ways for the fight back against Alzheimer's. But my last note is just to say how proud I am of the team that you've talked to today. And they, while as articulate and as devoted and committed as they are, they represent a team of another 20 people who really are the people that are driving this effort globally under the rubric of Us Against Alzheimer's, Leaders Engaged in Alzheimer's Disease, and the Global CEO Initiative on Alzheimer's. So it's a set of networks and coalitions, and as I said earlier, an analogy to Facebook, that work through cooperative mechanisms, collaborative mechanisms to bring the power of a wide variety of people together to get at this disease. We named our organization Us Against Alzheimer's for a purpose, because it's going to take all of us to do this. And so at the outset, when you talked initially about your own efforts, the need collaboratively to bring everybody together with all their disparate voices, all their different inflections, all their different experiences, into a series of networks and mechanisms where they can express their particular experience with the disease. We're trying to do that with Us Against Alzheimer's, and we're making a lot of progress, and thank you for recognizing that. But we are not yet even at the beginning of the beginning in the great fight back against this disease, and you're doing your role, we're doing our role, and it's going to take all of us to do it.
And it's, again, the power of one, like you say.
Yep.
We can all do something.
Yeah, it's just kind of lighting that spark in everybody and getting them to believe that they can make a difference. And when we join forces together, it is just incredible how fast we can get that ball rolling and change course with things. Do you have any plans for any more kind of subgroups that you have in the next couple of years to roll out, or are you feeling pretty comfortable that you've kind of covered the gamut?
We keep going. We're the little engine that has to.
Mm-hmm.
We've had a number of suggestions, and it's all a matter of financial constraints, because the demand from different segments of society to do this. Artists Against Alzheimer's. There are so many musicians and visual artists and other kinds of artistic expression. All of those artists are beginning to express themselves in a wide variety of ways, and so bringing that whole creative community into a network would be powerful. Some people, not so jokingly, have suggested Pets Against Alzheimer's, because dogs have proven to be such a calming influence on those with dementia. So there are any number of different ways to shape national networks, even in the international networks, around a particular aspect of how to attack this disease and how to bring more people into it in ways in which they identify their experience with the disease in disparate ways. So, no, the only constraint in creating another half dozen networks is simply a financial limitation. So, as you said earlier, what can you do? You can contribute to Us Against Alzheimer's. Go to usagainsalzheimers.org and donate, because indeed it is only financial constraints that is preventing us from continuing to develop more ways to touch upon the segments of society that are being affected by this disease.
Well, again, kudos to you and your vision and your ability to pull together the team that you have. And not everybody can do that, as you well know, and you've done it beautifully and are so well respected throughout the world, and have really made a name and a hand that reaches out to all, which, again, is not something that happens with all organizations. But it's your organization has an aura about it of just really being truly collaborative at all levels. And that's one of the things that I love, is an individual versus the CEO. You know, everyone's here together, joining forces and in being creative in their own ways. You know, the thing about pets or artists and stuff, it's tapping into skills and letting people know that what they do matters. I don't care if they want to knit shawls, you know, for people, that can help and that can be powerful and it can be a great message. You know, there's nothing that can't work if we just try. You know, we can all make a difference in our own way. And I think those sparks of creativity get people thinking, well, gosh, if they did that, then maybe I could do this. You know, it takes the scary out of it. So thank you for taking the scary out of the disease with your vision and with your organization. Again, just respect you all so much in terms of what you're doing. And I'm going to throw something out there, and I probably should do it off the side, but I'm going to do it in public anyways. But if for your conference you were ever interested in doing a screening of the movie His Neighbor Phil, please reach out to me. It's very powerful, and it can get people to dig into their pockets, because it really shows what a family goes through, what a community goes through. People laugh and cry together, but it might be a way to be able to raise some funds for your mission. So
do you have access to it?
Yes, I do. I'm a platinum sponsor of that. So,
Or maybe send it.
and so it's just another thought. Anyway, we can work together for the greater good. Sign me up. I'm there. So,
Thank you very much, Lori, for hosting so many of our quite extraordinary team today. We appreciate the enormous amount of time you've given us and the opportunity to speak to your audience.
Well, thank you. You guys have a wonderful year, and I'm sure we'll be in touch. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
You.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hi, I'm Lori LeBay, and I wanted to tell you about Alzheimer Speaks, which is another great podcast. You see, my own mother lived with dementia for 30 years, and I felt lost. Did you know every 3 seconds someone in the world is being diagnosed with dementia? Odds are it's going to hit your families too. We want to help you connect to services, products, tools, research, and stories so you can be prepared. Please subscribe to Alzheimer Speaks on your favorite podcast platform.